The United States has confirmed that the third round of trade and economic discussions with China will take place on July 28 and 29 in Stockholm, Sweden. This development signals a renewed effort to stabilize the economic relationship between the world's two largest economies, although the issues now go far beyond tariffs. U.S. Treasury Secretary Benson, speaking in a recent interview, indicated that the two sides may explore extending a current tariff suspension, which is set to expire on August 12. While China has not yet officially confirmed its participation, the talks are expected to proceed as scheduled. This upcoming meeting follows earlier rounds held in Geneva and London, both initiated by the United States. Washington appears eager to resolve some of the lingering economic tensions that have persisted since the initial stages of the trade dispute. However, this time, the conversation is expected to extend beyond traditional trade topics. According to Benson, the agenda will also include China's continued imports of oil from countries currently under U.S. sanctions, namely Russia and Iran. He reaffirmed the Biden administration's position, originally voiced by former President Trump, that nations purchasing oil from these countries could face secondary tariffs of up to 100%. China remains the largest importer of Russian and Iranian crude oil. The U.S. is attempting to leverage this position to not only exert pressure on Beijing but also encourage its European allies to support the implementation of secondary sanctions on oil trade with sanctioned states. While energy-related issues are not traditionally associated with trade agreements, Washington appears to be using trade negotiations as a broader diplomatic tool. The U.S. has maintained a layered tariff system on Chinese goods, with an existing 30% duty composed of a general 10% base rate and an additional 20% penalty tariff, informally linked to synthetic opioid-related concerns. In a temporary measure following the Geneva negotiations on May 12, both nations agreed to suspend a further 24% in tariffs for a 90-day period. With that deadline approaching, the U.S. is pushing for more long-term solutions, hoping to tie tariff reductions to other commitments from China. One of Washington's key interests remains a reduction in the U.S. trade deficit. To that end, the administration is likely to propose that China increase its purchases of American goods, particularly in the energy sector. Historical agreements reflect this strategy. Under the 2020 trade deal, China committed to increase its imports of U.S. energy products by $18.5 billion in 2020 and by $33.9 billion in 2021. These benchmarks were not fully met, but the intent behind them remains a cornerstone of current U.S. strategy. The Trump administration appears to view energy exports as a crucial bargaining chip, aiming to shift some of China's energy purchases away from sanctioned suppliers and toward U.S. exporters. However, global energy markets are far more complex than they were 5 years ago. China's strategic partnerships, especially with Russia, have strengthened, and its growing economic resilience gives Beijing more flexibility at the negotiating table. On June 24, Trump made a pointed statement on social media suggesting that while China is free to purchase Iranian oil, he would prefer they also buy significantly more from the United States. He framed this as a pragmatic solution that could support both trade balance and broader geopolitical goals. Despite these overtures, observers note that Beijing is unlikely to reduce its energy imports from Russia or Iran in the short term, particularly ahead of a planned visit by Russian President Vladimir Putin to China in early September. Meanwhile, Western allies are also weighing their positions. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte recently urged countries like China, India, and Brazil to apply pressure on Moscow, warning of potential economic repercussions if Russia's military activities continue. However, China's response suggests that it prioritizes its strategic autonomy over external pressure. Should the upcoming talks in Stockholm fail to deliver tangible progress, the United States may follow through on its threat to impose new secondary tariffs. If that occurs, China is expected to respond with reciprocal measures, potentially reigniting the kind of tariff escalations seen in the earlier phases of the trade war. Still, neither side appears eager to return to that scenario. A negotiated compromise, involving increased Chinese purchases of U.S. energy alongside limited concessions on other fronts, may offer a more sustainable path forward. But with global alliances shifting and domestic pressures mounting on both sides, the road to resolution remains uncertain.